Easy Explain the Unconscious by Sigmund Freud, Wish Fulfillment. So again, to start off, we're just going to put this little bit into context. So again, we're working within the interpretation of dreams. We're still within Chapter 7, the psychology of the dream processes, and now we're moving into Section C, which is titled The Wish Fulfillment. So here, what we're going to set out to look at is really how dreams are manifestations of our unconscious wishes being fulfilled. That's how Freud's going to define that here. So let's look at how this is really just defined coming out of the very early on in this section, dreams as fulfilling unconscious wishes. So here Freud says the dream would not occur if the preconscious wish were not reinforced from another source. That source is the unconscious. I believe that the conscious wish becomes effective in exciting a dream only when it succeeds in arousing a similar unconscious wish which reinforces it. He goes on. These unconscious wishes are always active and ready to express themselves whenever they find an opportunity of allying themselves with an impulse from consciousness and transferring their own greater intensity to the lesser intensity of the latter. So to sum this up is, sure, when we're conscious, we have wishes. We have things we want. There are drives we want to fulfill. There are goals and dreams, to use dreams in a slightly different sense, that we have. But when we're regressing back down into the unconscious as we fall asleep, as we enter dreams, some of these wishes are carried through, and we find a whole new collection of wishes. We find our unconscious, the censored and repressed wishes. And those really come to our psyche, they come to our awareness, and we'll get to the certainty of dreams a little further down. But those are really expressing themselves, and they get even more intense. They get doubled up when they're compatible with a conscious dream as well. So that's really what we're getting at here. Then Freud goes on to, I just thought this was a pretty key point. He actually systematizes something here. He's looking at 5 groups of preconscious thought impulses that continue into sleep, right? So this is good stuff. Remember, as we're regressing from consciousness to preconsciousness to unconscious, what is being carried through that psychic flow? So there's really 5 things here that Freud says. The first one is those which have not been completed during the day to some accidental cause, right? So something you wanted to do, you didn't get to do, that might show up in your dreams, right? That might become an unconscious wish fulfillment. Second thing is those which have been left uncompleted because our mental powers have failed us, couldn't figure it out, right? Unsolved problems. So for Freud, in analyzing and interpreting dreams, he was really he was trying to help people solve their problems, right? He was like, why are you dreaming about this? What's coming up in your dream? This is something you couldn't figure out when you were awake, so your sleeping brain, your dreaming brain is trying to solve it now. The third one, those which have been turned back and suppressed during the day. This is reinforced by a powerful 4th group. But this is censorship of the consciousness, right? This is your socialization saying, I wish for that, but if I go for it, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble. I'm going to be punished. I'm going to come across some kind of pain, right? So we're going to suppress that. We're going to repress it. So that 4th group is those which have been excited in our unconscious during the day by the workings of the preconscious. And finally, we made a 5th consisting of, pause real quick. If we look at that progression, unconscious dreams can be very excited. Maybe it made it up to preconsciousness. Maybe it got stuck there. It got suppressed by the conscious censorship at that point. So maybe there's going to be some collaboration at that point. And finally, the 5th one, the indifferent impressions of the day, which have therefore been left unsettled. So sometimes your dreams for Freud are you just figuring things out that you couldn't figure out, right? You felt indifferent about, you felt unsettled about. Now we're going to try to process it in our unconscious dream. So I mentioned pain, and for Freud, you can have painful dreams, and I don't think he calls them nightmares. I couldn't find it, at least in the translation I was working from, but nightmares, right? So let's see what Freud has to say about having painful dreams in which you're experiencing pain. So what does he say about these types of nightmares? So an unconscious and repressed wish, whose fulfillment could only be felt as painful by the dreamer's ego, has seized the opportunity offered by the continued cathexis or catharsis of painful day residues, has lent them its support, and has thus made them capable of being dreamed. But whereas in case A, the unconscious wish coincided with the conscious one, in case B, the discord between the unconscious and the conscious, the repressed material in the ego is revealed. So if you experience something painful during the day, you try to get over it quickly, you try to repress it, this is going to come back up again in your dreams, right? According to Freud, you say this is your painful day residues are going to come back up as unconscious nighttime experiences in your dreams. especially when they're coinciding, they're doubling up, your ego is repressing them, they're going to be revealed in the unconscious while you're dreaming. And there's a similar one, similar in the sense that it's not quite experiencing pain, it's punishment. Maybe it's the actual punishment, the consequences of something, the fear of punishment. I'd say this is another type of nightmare. So on this point, Freud says that punishment dreams point, therefore, to the possibility of a still more extensive participation of the ego in dream formation. The mechanism of dream formation becomes, indeed, in every way more transparent if, in place of the antithesis conscious and unconscious, we put the antithesis ego and repressed. And I thought this was a really cool analogy that he's setting up here, looking at the consciousness and unconsciousness as opposites, right? And he's also looking at, if we're associating the ego with consciousness, right? And that's another huge Freudian concept we're really not going to get too much into here. But if the ego is consciousness, we're looking at unconsciousness as repression of the ego, right? Your unconscious is your repressed ego, right? And he's saying that's going to be key in explaining how and when you're having your punishment nightmares, your punishment dreams. Now into a big theme that comes up here, a big Freudian theme of transference, and it very much so in general. Transference for Freud was, when you're working with someone through this is when you're transferring your very deep, strong inner feelings to your psychologist, right? This is usually when you're falling in love with your psychologist as a love object. But we're actually going to turn to Jonathan Lear in just a second to look at different types of transference. But here Freud says that we thus see that the day residues, among which we may now include the indifferent impressions, not only borrow something from the unconscious when they secure a share in dream formation, namely the motive power at the disposal of the repressed wish, but they also offer to the unconscious something that is indispensable to it, namely the points of attachment necessary for transference. So for Freud, you're also experiencing transference, it's these very deep-seated, very strong emotions. Those are going to be part of the unconscious as well, right? And those could be uncovered in your dreams. They could be forming your dreams, motivating your dreams. But let's turn to Lear again. Again, he wrote a great book as part of the Routledge series on Freud in 2005. He outlines 3 types of transference. I thought this was maybe helpful to put in here. So Lear says that transference of meaning from a significant figure in the analysand's world onto the analyst. There's also transference as an idiosyncratic world coming into view, right? Just pulling something out of your unconscious in that regard. And the third one is transference as the active disruption of the capacity to carry out transference in either of the first 2 senses, right? So maybe a catch-all there to wrap things up. But again, it's a great secondary resource if you'd like to know more about Freud, and I think Lear does a great job at describing a lot of Freud's concepts. So let's look at childhood dreams. That also comes up here for Freud when we're looking at wish fulfillment, right? Infantile wish fulfillment is a big part of this for Freud. So he says, dreaming is a fragment of the superseded psychic life of the child. So he thinks a lot of times when we're dreaming, we're pulling some things from our childhood into them, right? Even when we're adults. In a similar vein, we have psychoneuroses. A lot of these are during our formative years of development. Freud says that the theory of all psychoneurotic symptoms culminates in the one proposition that they too must be conceived as wish fulfillments of the unconscious. So looking at wish fulfillments and being directly tied to the unconscious, your unconscious being where all your wishes live, your dreams being psychic manifestations of those wishes, that's going to be huge for Freud, especially even in your waking conscious life, manifesting as psychoneuroses. Footnote on this, let's just get a little bit deeper into psychoneuroses. What does Freud exactly mean by that? So one portion of the symptom corresponds to the unconscious wish fulfillment, while the other corresponds to the reaction formation opposed to it, right? And this would be your conscious ego trying to censor it, trying to repress it, fighting back against it. We have this psychic conflict, and that's where the psychologist comes in to help you try to work through that. As I said a couple minutes ago, we were going to get to the certainty of dreaming and how it feels so real. This is also a point in the movie Inception by Christopher Nolan back from 2010. Freud says that throughout the whole of our sleep, we are just as certain that we are dreaming as we are certain that we are sleeping. And how true is that, right? When you're dreaming, it feels very real. Sometimes just as real as when you are awake and not dreaming. So that's a tour of the subsection on wish fulfillment. Huge theme for Freud as he's building out his concept of the unconscious. So for now, hope that helps.